This is Power 98.7. And now you're listening to Power Talk with Mbuyiseni and Ndlozi. 9 a.m. to midday. Taking your calls on 0861 987 000.
Welcome back, Bantwana Benkosi. In this segment of the show, we're going to focus, as indicated earlier, on South Africa having become an important international player in the global drug trafficking network worth billions in dollars. I'm joined by the Department of International Relations and Cooperation spokesperson Clayson Munyela. Welcome to Power Talk, Clayson.
It's good to be on your show. They no longer call me spokesperson, but I'll take that.
What do they call you these days? Ambassador?
That's too. Head of public diplomacy.
Jesus, what's the difference?
Say that again.
What's the difference between spokesperson and head of public diplomacy?
No, there's another fellow that holds that title of speaking for the department. But
okay.
Yeah, I often get drafted in to explain stuff.
Okay. Thanks very much for creating time. And I also have on the line through Teams, Jason Elling, senior expert at the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, illicit drug market and policy analyst. Welcome to Power Talk, Jason, and thanks very much for creating time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks. Jason, just for the benefit of all our listeners, from what part of the world are you joining us?
I'm from Canada right at the moment.
You're in Canada, very big Canada. Any specific city?
Not far from Montreal.
Montreal, yeah, bonjour. And we've got a firm, what is called drug mule, and we'll explain this earlier at a later stage. At the moment, is joining us anonymously. I'm going to welcome, and then we will, as it were, speak to her later. Specifically to look into her story. But for now, let me just salute her. Thanks very much for agreeing to come and tell your story publicly here on Power Talk, and also creating time specifically for us. Welcome to Power Talk.
Thank you so much. No problem. I don't mind to do this because I want people to know what it's like, and it's not worth doing it.
Absolutely. I appreciate that deeply. Jason, let me start with you. If you could maybe paint for us the picture of international drug trafficking and how precisely does South Africa come into the picture, and precisely for how long, and to which markets is it significant?
Well, that's a challenging question, but I'll give it a go.
Yeah.
I think that the important thing to consider is the geographic location of South Africa being in the sort of in between the source of heroin in the world, which is continues to be Afghanistan, and the source of cocaine in the world, which is Latin America, and the major markets in the world, North America and Europe in particular, but also Australia and New Zealand, where illicit drugs are some of the most expensive in the world as well. So by benefit of having world-class airports, ports, and being kind of in between all of these places, South Africa is positioned geographically very advantageously for international criminal groups. And I think from what we've been seeing in terms of global trafficking, South Africa has really begun to take on a role over the last 12 to 15 years in particular.
Mm. And if you could break it down, how are these syndicates structured in South Africa? Just the further details, as it were, and maybe the countries that are involved?
Well, just about any drug trafficking organization that is moving cocaine, heroin, variety of other synthetic substances, will probably either have a presence in South Africa. So you would be looking at Latin American groups, you'd be looking at South Asian groups, Chinese groups. But also there's a substantial role played by South Africans and African organizations as well on the continent. So it's really a diverse collection of international syndicates, but also domestic individuals and groups that are contributing together to enable the traffic to occur and to embed a lot of the structures that are necessary for the trafficking industry to persist.
And just to unpack that embeddedness, maybe locating South Africa's various authorities who are either complicit or maybe active. What have been the global initiative against transnational organized crimes, observation of government's own complicity when it comes to South Africa?
Well, you can't have an embedded drug trafficking industry without the complicity of individuals and or institutions and organizations in any country of the world. So South Africa is no different to that. The only way that you can move drugs through airports is by having complicity of officials in one level or another. Moving drugs through ports by having complicity of individuals or a number of groups of individuals within institutions who have either compromised institutions or have one way or another infiltrated them to enable their business to go forward. So corruption is a core element that enables drug trafficking to continue globally.
But isn't it precisely these capacities or vulnerabilities within the South African security authorities that make South Africa particularly attractive to the global syndicate businesses in drug trafficking?
Perhaps, but the vulnerabilities that we're talking about are present in many other countries around the world. And I mean, as much as there are complicit individuals, there are also individuals who are not complicit. So it's a real challenge to try and identify the bad elements, as it were, in institutions in a way that doesn't also besmirch those who aren't involved altogether. So it's challenging, and that's part of the problem, that it's so easy to manipulate institutions in one way or another through the acts of individuals or small groups of individuals who are part of a larger group as a whole. And I think the challenge that South Africa has, first in identifying individuals, say in ports or in other authorities, and removing them, is no different from the challenge that other countries around the world face as well. So it's not purely a South African problem, but it's a problem that's exacerbated in South Africa as a result of its excellent infrastructure when it comes to moving things around the world, commodities, trade.
I see. Clayson, as you can hear, Jason locates the sort of time frame as around about 12 years ago. What has been Derko's own experience that suddenly about 12, maybe 15 years ago, we started to see a surge in South Africa becoming key in the global drug trafficking networks?
Yeah. Firstly, I want to just acknowledge Jason's shout out to the country's excellent infrastructure, modern and world-class facilities that we have, although the syndicates are now being attracted by this infrastructure to then move their dodgy goods around. It is true that there's been a surge of sorts. In particular, what concerns us is that young, rural young girls are being targeted as potential drug mules. So you would have seen a number of young women that have been arrested, not just in South Africa, but also in particular in Latin America, in Asia, and other regions that Jason was talking about, where this drug trade appears to be thriving. It concerns us because in certain countries in the world, once you are caught with drugs, they have capital punishment. It's one of the things that we try and raise as part of the awareness on this matter with young girls in particular in rural areas, of course in townships as well, that stay away. If a deal looks too good to be true, it probably is. I mean, they offer them in the range of 15 to 20,000, sometimes 30,000, to say, look, the only thing you have to do is just get this thing, get onto the plane. When you arrive in, let's say, Sao Paulo, or vice versa, from Sao Paulo to Johannesburg, somebody will be waiting for you, no problem. And the modus operandi that we've noticed is that there are some possibly that go through, but there will be one that is sacrificed. Those are the ones that get arrested. So just to back up what Jason was saying, we have seen a trend where there's been a surge, an increase of sorts. In particular, the targeting of young women concerns us.
What are the major sort of countries in this case? There must be specific countries that either are a target where these South Africans end up in their prisons, or where South Africa keeps coming up as an important nodal point in the chain, in the network internationally.
So I'll let the statistics speak in response to that question. We've got a number of young South African women in prisons in Sao Paulo, in particular in Brazil. Thailand has been another area where we've got a...
Clayson, you said numbers. Just a reminder. Again. You said numbers. I thought when you said, let statistics speak for themselves, you're going to say, in Sao Paulo, I've got this number of South Africans serving sentences before you go to Thailand and do the same.
So let me do this. The last time I checked, which would have been 2 weeks back, we had around 686 South Africans who are incarcerated in prisons overseas for drug-related crimes. As I said, one of the main concerns for us is that some of these countries where our nationals are being held have capital punishment. We actually already have quite a few that have been subjected to this punishment for drug-related crimes. So it is something that concerns government quite greatly, and we run a lot of campaigns to try and bring awareness to our people to stay away from this. But of course, there are these triple challenges that we are confronted with as a country. So we understand that anything that promises money, quick money, would be attractive to
when you say capital punishment, just remind all of us what that entails.
So in countries like China, if you are caught for a drug-related crime, the possibility is that you may be hanged.
Has any South African suffered this?
We've had a few South Africans who have been subjected to the death penalty for drug-related crimes, yes.
Jason, 680 is what is that in comparison to other countries where its citizens are held in some prisons are somewhere in the world, in Sao Paulo, Thailand, China, whatever, because of drug trafficking? Just so we get a sense of how big or small is 680.
Well, there are countries where the numbers run.
Okay, you can go, Clayson. We'll take Jason after. But yeah, I know your names sound familiar. Clayson,
No,
Jason.
let him go. Let him go. Let him go
Okay,
ahead.
Jason.
Sure. I think one of the challenges is that we really don't know what the total number of people incarcerated around the world for these crimes are. So to try and understand what proportion, for example, are South African versus the other nations of the world is challenging to do. But what I would say is that there are some thousands of young women and young men as well who have been captured and placed in prison and are facing a variety of sentences, including, as Clayson said, capital punishment. Are South Africans among the highest number of individuals around the world? Difficult to say, but certainly 686 is a big number. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are other nations around the world that maybe are close to this, but it's inaccurate, I think, to say that South Africans are, for example, the majority of those who've been imprisoned around the world. I think we have to look at the problem in a different way, and the problem is one of vulnerability, one of exploitation, and one that's related a great deal to individuals trying to find a way to earn money in the absence of, from their perspective, any other way of getting by. And that's a feature that's common in many, many nations around the world and drives many people to participate in the drug trade.
Your assessment of global or international police and security organizations and collaborative efforts to try and combat the drug trafficking business, and maybe South Africa's sort of cooperation and participation thereof. Are you able to give us that?
Oh, I could try, sure. So in terms of how successful South Africa is in confronting international trafficking?
Yes, on the one hand, but also the sort of international efforts and also South Africa's participation in them. How do you rate them? Is there enough being done to undermine the trafficking business of drugs?
Well, the drug business is good business. And if we measure it in terms of a couple of indicators, we see that business continues to be good, and efforts to disrupt it, to reduce it, while noble, really haven't met with any significant long-term sustainable success. There have been moments of success, joint operations globally to interdict groups have through a number of global operations led by DEA or the Australians or the British have led to arrests around the world. But often the case is that when individuals are arrested and put in prison from these organizations, even if they're leaders of the organizations, they're quickly replaced and business continues forward. Every year upon year, the number of people who use drugs around the world continues to increase. And every year upon year, the availability of drugs in markets around the world continues largely uninterrupted. So even though we hear of large seizures, often measuring in the tons and in some cases tens of tons of drugs, the challenge is that even though we're pulling those drugs off of the market, they may have a temporary interruption in supply to different areas wherever the seizures may have occurred. But sustainably speaking, the international drug business is resilient and continues to prosper because it's not limited by borders. It's not limited by laws or regulations. And it's something that will continue to bring in new blood when in the way of mules and others to continue to drive the business model forward.
And Clayson, same question. How much of South Africa's own efforts, I mean government's own efforts, if you could address us about if there is specialized programs to combat drug trafficking in and around our borders, and some of the international collaborations with these countries you've just mentioned and South Africa.
Oh, for sure. And I think the evidence is what you've seen in the last couple of weeks and months. Some of the successes that the units that have been created within law enforcement agencies to specifically focus on combating drugs and drug trafficking. So that does exist. There are units that have been created specifically to focus on this, and there are collaborations both in the SADC region, on the African continent, and internationally with other agencies, because as Jason was saying, this is a global challenge, this is a global problem that affects many countries. So we do collaborate and partner with them in trying to combat this. And there has been several areas where there's been successes that have been registered. You've seen the number of people that have been arrested based on intelligence-driven operations. So certainly that does exist.
Thank you very much, Jason Elling, Senior Expert at the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime and the Head of Public Diplomacy, Clayson Munyela from the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. Thanks deeply to both of you for sharing your thoughts and joining us here on Power Talk.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
We're going to take the headlines, and on the other side, we speak to a woman that is a former drug mule, as it were, who was arrested in Hong Kong, released recently back to South Africa after about a decade. Stay tuned. We're taking the headlines. It's 9:30 here on Power Talk with Nyakalote.